Nonetheless, welcome to this discussion. And the idea behind doing it was to talk about published work on food and give a sense of what to do, why, issues, etc. And Sabari has very kindly agreed to moderate the discussion. So he has recently submitted his PhD with South Asian University, and I'll just, ask him to take over.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Ad Hoc Group 3 Food Culture and Society book review event. We have with us two amazing set of speakers whom I regard as like academics with unbridled passion. So they are Dr. Ishita Dey and Dr. Rituparna Patgiri. So Dr. Ishita Dey is an assistant professor in sociology at South Asian University, New Delhi. Having completed a PhD from the Delhi School of Economics, she had earlier taught at Lady Shri Ram College and Ambedkar University, Delhi. She is known for her work on sweetness and the sweet industry in Bengal. Her research interests travels a range of domains that include food, gender, and census. Lately, she has also started to look at the infrastructure and social mobility with a focus on migrant journeys. She serves as an editorial collective member of the Gastronomic Journal and the co-editor of Society and Culture in South Asia. Her latest monograph, Sweet Texas Crafting Mishti in Bengal, published by Routledge, was released in September 2025, which we will be discussing in this event. Apart from being an academic and a writer, she also communicates her research through art exhibitions, art installations, and other innovative platforms. We also have with us Dr. Rituparna Patgiri, who is an assistant professor in sociology at the Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati. She did a PhD in Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, and had earlier taught at Indraprastha College for Women. Her research interests span a broad range of fields such as media, food, gender, and pedagogy. She has published numerous articles on the above mentioned topics on academic and popular platforms. She is one of the co-founders of Doing Sociology and also the convener of this group, Ad Hoc Group 3. Her recent co-edited volume titled Food, Culture and Society in India, uh, Social, Political, Economic and Cultural Perspectives was released in November by Berkan Books, and which is also a part of discussion in this evening. I think the format goes like this, where the speakers will talk about their respective books for 7 to 10 minutes. And then I'll be sharing my own thoughts on both the books, and then we'll open up for questions. Is that fine? I mean, so shall we start with Dr. Ishita's book or like how? Okay. So yeah, I think Ishita's book, as I said, like Sweet Texas, we have been like waiting for quite a while for the book to be published, and it's finally out. And then it's a biography of sweetness, as she calls it. So it's not just about following sweetness, but also it also goes further, a step further in shedding light on the labor that goes behind its making and how it's mediated by the prevailing social and legal structures. I think it's better that she herself introduces a book and then enlighten us about like what the the themes that she talks about in the book. Ishita, I mean, the it's up to you. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Sabari, for the introduction, and thank you to Dr. Rituparna Patgiri for keeping this ad hoc committee going, also in terms of the very wonderful discussions we have been having. I, in particular, I really enjoy the presentations by the PhD scholars, and I hope more you will encourage those of you who have joined today. You will also encourage your friends to join this ad hoc committee. We are new, we are vibrant, but there is something that meaningful that we are trying to do. And I thought, because we are speaking to our own, I will take the liberty of flagging 2-3 issues about how methods, about the question of method. And because today's discussion is titled Social Life of Taste, I really thought that I'll flag the way in which I have understood and approached taste in my book. Now, as in, in when I look back, in 20 My God, seems like a decade, more than a decade ago. In 2010, actually, when I started my field work, right, I did not look at the taste the same way in which I look at taste today. And I'll tell this for two reasons. One, taste for me, the way we have been taught taste, in our sociology classrooms, taste for me was definitely a distinction, a classifier. Taste was definitely a social and cultural construct. But something that had missed out in the early days of my fieldwork, also looking at taste as a part of sensorial laboring practice. What do I mean by it? When we really look at the labor of sweet making, there is something very important I want to flag, because sweets, as all of us know in this virtual room, right, sweets are not only consumed by humans, they are also offered as part of various sort of sacred rituals across religions. This is very important to note. And sweets also kind of play a very important role in life cycle rituals, starting with birth to death. Given the sacred quality of sweets, it's important to flag that there's a lot of taboo around the touch of sweets itself, right? So one is that who is the rightful owner of sweets, right? And the rightful owner, within quotes, this has to go back to the way in which the confectioner caste in the northern part of India, it was the halwais. In the eastern part of India, in the context of Bengal, it was the middle range caste groups, or what we call the middle range caste groups, or the middle castes of Bengal, and Moira was one of the middle castes of Bengal. Now, interestingly, today, if you look at who is a Moira, and Moira loosely came to be identified also as the Bangla word for the confectioner. So this linguistic collapse that we have of between a confectioner and a confectioner caste also tells about who has the rightful knowledge of creating and recreating a taste, right? So one is that when we really look at the makers of taste as far as sweetness is concerned, it is very important to remember that when I started my field work, it was not only, sweet shops were not only run by people of Modak caste group, but people went beyond. There were owners who went beyond the Modak caste group, but at the same time, there were various sort of, and we can have a discussion around it, but there were various ways in which that this idea that we are the rightful owners, we are someone who has both the tacit knowledge and the implicit knowledge. This was there. Having said that, when it comes to really looking at the hierarchy of who is creating the taste from the purview of the sweet shops, we really see a sort of a two-tier hierarchy, where there is the owners of the sweet shops and the karigors of the sweet shop. The karigors of the sweet shops, interestingly, came from caste groups who were in close association with the Modak caste groups. Okay, so one of the most of the karigors that I have come across in the field and field work came from the agricultural caste group and the caste groups that owned the cows, right? This also kind of tells about, hidden in this idea of the taste, or hidden behind the idea of the taste, is also a certain kind of production of a laboring body. This is my first submission. Second, I want to take you through that moment I shifted the lens of the fieldwork, not only from West Bengal, but I moved to Bangladesh. What I also saw was that, and the Bangladesh fieldwork I conducted exactly in the month of Ramzan, what was particularly interesting is that sweet shops don't shut down the shutters, right? Which also means, but at the same time, the sacred quality of the sweets undergoes a different sort of a meaning. Like one of the sweets that really is found, particularly in the entire month of Ramzan, all sweet shops start selling jalebi, because that is one of the sweets that is used, that is a commonly consumed item to break the fast, or served as a iftari food. Starting with the most poshest of the poshest cafes in Dhaka, to the small scale sweet shop. Every sweet shop during Ramzan will, particularly during the month of Ramzan, will sell jalebi. At the same time, when we really look at the spectrum of sweets, and this comes to my second submission, because I said we studied taste as a distinction, but how do we really qualify for taste of a food item? And this is something I've tried to address in my book. How do we qualify taste of a food item which really doesn't have a nutritional value? And how do we really understand the taste of and the relevance of the food item that doesn't have a nutritional value, yet it is consumed by all and sundry? To understand the taste of the item, it's very important to really have a sense of who consumes sweets, what are the pricing of a food product. And here I would like to make two sort of submissions. One, when it comes to the taste as a distinction, it has always been identified as taste for necessity, that what are the sort of essential taste, and the taste has been moved to the luxury. So this divide of what is essential, what is non-essential, what is luxury, there is always, and what is necessity, this sort of a binary framework has guided our ideas of taste. However, what I show in the book through the case of sweets is that the same sweet that is prized, and because of its sacred quality, the same sweets that can be sold for a price of rupees 25 or so, they are also sold on select days for rupee 1, so that it's accessible for all and sundry. Does it mean that, did the sweet shops never come under the irk of the state? Well, no. In the month of summer, before we achieved milk sufficiency, there was constant attempts by the state to regulate the milk-based sweets, because sweets was perceived as a sort of a wastage of the milk. And this goes back to the entire idea of the fact that when it comes to the making of sweets, sweets are produced from milk. The primary base is chana. 1 liter of milk actually yields 250 grams of chana, which means that 750 ml of milk is somewhere getting converted into whey water. This was one of the major debates in the 1960s, where we really saw the sweet shops coming under the attack. But again, what allowed them to survive was the cultural understandings of taste, right? Does the cultural understanding of taste, always exceed the legal understanding of taste and the state? And this is where, does state have any role in the way in which, any role in the taste of food items that we eat? And here I would like to draw your attention to the last chapter of my book, where I talk about authorship and what does geographical indication mean. There's a lot of pride that people take when a certain sweet becomes associated with a certain place. But in the book, I argue that if you really think about how a place is made, place is not devoid of people, right? Every time people move, the place is made up of people, and if people are moving from one place to another, so is the way in which we really need to understand the making of a place. So how do we really understand this place-based identity of a food item? Because it's because what the GI applications require is a sort of a seamless continuity between people and place. And given that there's a lot of migration, there's a loss of ingredient loss, all of it, how do we therefore really understand GI? And here I unpack the question of authorship. There is, if there are teachers in the audience, you will particularly find chapter 2 interesting, which I have titled Following Sweetness, that how do you follow a taste? And do you only follow a taste by observing, sensing, all of it? And here I kind of argue that archives are as important in the social life of a taste. And by archives, I particularly draw attention to the caste association newsletters. Sabari, how much time do I have? Am I
Oh, sorry, sir, I was muted. I think it's better to wrap it up in 2-3 minutes.
Okay. So, so the way in which the book is structured is that I first introduce the idea of I first introduce what is how do we look at sweetness as excess. The second chapter, this I will encourage all of us to read and comment, that how do you really follow a taste, and what it is to follow a taste across, not only in sweet shops, but why multi-sited ethnography is important. And what we mean by multi-sited ethnography is not just doing field work, but also archives inform a large part of my study. The third chapter, I have titled it Mapping Sweetness, that and this is to contest this idea of one place and one sweet, where I really look at three sort of ingredients and give you a processual mapping. The fourth and fifth chapter is actually about labor, as Sabari was mentioning. It is titled Making Sweets and Navigating Work. The sixth chapter and the seventh chapter is to do with the legalities. In the sixth chapter, I revisit 60s milk control orders, and the seventh chapter is about the GI. And finally, I end with the question of value and excess. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ishita Dey, for the wonderful summary of the book, and we'll be talking about it later as well. Now, I think we'll move on to Dr. Rituparna Patgiri's co-edited volume, which is a collection of essays by authors around the globe, which is on food, but it covers a range of themes such as identities, migration, nutrition, and also food as it exists, as it is produced, consumed, and represented in digital media. I think over to you, Dr. Patgiri, to introduce the book, and then we'll move on with the discussions.
Thank you, Sabari. Thank you to Dr. Ishita for being so precise in talking about her book. Let me also thank people who have joined. I know that my supervisor is also here, so especially thankful that she took the time out to join, and some of my friends and students. Really, really grateful for that. I want to talk a little bit about the publication process, considering that this was actually my first book, whether edited or solo authored, and probably a little bit of reflection around the publishing process would help younger scholars who are also contemplating, writing and publishing, etc. So, a lot of misconceptions exist about publishing and how it is network based. It is true at some level, but when I made the book proposal for this volume and submitted, I was about to be awarded with my PhD. I was waiting for the defense to happen, and I couldn't believe when Bergerhan said yes. And what I realized is that the most important thing was to put in the book proposal in the right place, primarily because Bergerhan was looking for kind of edited collections and textbooks which would go directly into syllabi of courses, and this volume fit in. Essentially, the idea of doing a manuscript involves a lot of work, especially if it's an edited volume, and one really needs to gather people from the world together now to even pitch one to the publishers. I realized that I wanted fresh voices, and because this book is about food culture and society, I also wanted voices from hitherto marginalized kind of backgrounds. So this book explores the relationship between food culture and society in India through four broad sections: food culture and identity, food memory and migration, food livelihood and nutrition, and food consumption and media. The introduction and the conclusion present an overview and then a summary and bringing together respectively of each of these chapters, hopefully. Essentially, the book has chapters by a very diverse set of scholars, particularly young scholars, who may be either in their research stage in the PhD or even in the writing, and I think what gave me the most pleasure while reading through the chapters and sending them for peer review, editing them, was the novelty in the writing and the voices that we were bringing in. For instance, Asif's paper on how street food in Muslim localities of Bihar have a national consciousness embedded to it, primarily brings to light the idea of how we need to think about street food in Muslim localities. And very recently, I read an article on Jamia Nagar in terms of how food in these spaces, which are otherwise ghettoized in an urban kind of space, it becomes representative of a larger Muslim identity. And Asif brings in a very similar kind of argument in terms of how that post national identity of Muslims is constructed in street food of Bihar. This is one example of a researcher who, at that time, was trying to get into a PhD and, was working on this paper and bringing in a very interesting kind of perspective, which sort of, takes our imagination to think about food beyond what we know. Similarly, there is this one chapter by three authors on Kashmiri food, and all three of them they make an argument, Seher Iqbal, Farah Qayyum, and Fayaz Ahmad Bhatt, about Kashmiri cuisine as collective memory and how Kashmiri Muslims and Pandits use food as a bonding factor. To me, this chapter is a reminder of how food can bring identities which are in conflict with each other in regions like Kashmir. And this chapter also has some very beautiful images which use, the visuals to talk about food and memory. In a way, bringing in these voices from diverse locations and highlighting new questions. Now, the section on, let's say, food media and consumption has, again, very, very interesting chapters from Priyakshi Pandey and Disha Bist's The Digitalization of Uttarakhand's Cuisine, where they look at Uttaranchal and what food means in that app context, as well as Sohini Bhattacharji's virtually mediated farms and how social media helps in the marketing and consumption processes of organic farms. If some of you will remember, Sohini had also presented as part of the Early Career Scholars panel. Similarly, Amrita Basu Roy Chaudhary's chapter picks up on food advertisements and how they were gendered during the post-pandemic Bengali print advertisement era. And using visuals, she makes an interesting case study of the relationship between food and gender. Maureen Kalita and Ashirvad Chakrabarti's chapter on anime and Japanese soft power in India's Northeast, again, brings in a very fresh perspective to understand a region which is currently grappling with questions of consumerist modernity and growing urbanization. So, interestingly, what we have is a mix of these voices which bring in stories that can be heard in different ways from different perspectives. Very quickly, let me share a little bit about food, livelihood, and nutrition. The smallest section where Shrija Banerjee talks about the midday meal in the context of Delhi. And Sampurna Das talks about high-yielding variety of rice and how this breeds inequality in the highly volatile floodplains of Assam. Again, stories that have been hitherto neglected as questions of either theoretical or methodological importance. The first two sections primarily deal with these omnipresent questions of food memory and migration and food culture and identity, where Rituparna Roy writes about Shutki in post-colonial Bengal, whereas Shruti Ranjani talks about food memory and materiality in East African Asian women's narratives. Apart from that, we also had deliberations on food, caste, and social identities, where Neha Arora and Aniket Nandan talk about the intricate relationship between food and caste. And interestingly, while Aniket Nandan is looking at the Bhumihars, Neha Arora is looking at Dalit food culture. So there is a diversity there as well when we are talking about food and identity. Now, in a book such as this, the aim and objective of the editors is primarily to highlight the work that the contributors do. And most of the chapters are empirical in nature because people were doing field work at various stages and bringing in those ideas. And I feel that because of that, the book has value primarily because of the contributors' work. And in a way, it can be used as a supplementary material, in teaching and getting to know more about food and where to sort of proceed further in one's research. I would also say that any criticisms which talk about the lacunae in the book can actually be used as building blocks to basically think about future research directions. Also, because as you may have already noticed, there is a lot of interest now on food. This RC is a result of the ISS leadership as well as initiatives that had been taken for the past 2 years or so. But it also reflects the interest that is on food, which has been growing both in a pedagogical way as well as in a research way. And I see that many young people respond very favorably to talks, discussions, workshops around food, methods, etc. So essentially, even if there is something missing, and I'm sure there could be many things which are missing, primarily because how much can also one book do, and also it has to end at some time. But those I wouldn't see them as lacks or criticisms, but as building blocks which future researchers could carry forward. And I would actually be very happy to see that grow. I also feel that the book is a part of how knowledge could be, collectively produced, because in an edited volume, the editors uh, do the job of putting things together, but the contributors actually bring in the real insights from, their works. And therefore, this volume sort of, is at that threshold or crossroad as well, where it could be read as a sociology text or even, as part of a food studies course. So I'll just wind up here. And in case there are questions, comments, suggestions, very happy to, take them related to anything basically concerning food, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Padgiri, for introducing the book. Here are a couple of thoughts on both the books. There are also a few questions. First, I'll start with Dr. Dey's book, which is like a fascinating work on sweets, as I said before. From what I understand, it's also to give some direction to the readers. It starts with consumption and sort of like slowly goes behind the scenes. Goes in the vertical direction towards like how sweets are produced and the labor behind it, and it sort of goes above and looks at like the processes that loom over sweet production and also sweet consumption. So it's actually fascinating how you manage to like combine both production and consumption, and then you have done it in the smoothest way possible. My question and also a comment is your idea about following, and also it also relates to the idea of a regulation actually. So initially, it's a fascinating work like that uses multi-sited ethnography. And also you also talk a lot about following. I mean, you have one of your chapters named as following. When it comes to following, when it comes to multi-sided ethnography in general, it's not just following, but it's also about like following and mapping and unrelating it with the larger structures. So a larger system. I mean, people have critiqued it as well. So you rightly go to the idea of regulation, how milk is reduced, milk is regulated, and at least how it was regulated in the 60s, in the post-World War era. When it comes to regulation, people always talk about talk in the past, how things were regulated in the 50s and 60s, commodities, and also like general distribution and circulation of goods were regulated in the 50s and 60s. And I wonder how to theorize regulation in the contemporary era when nothing is regulated. It's sort of people actually seek some sort of regulation. Like paneer, people ask paneer to be regulated now. There is some sort of a disillusionment, and there's also distrust with the government now. So back then, it's I understand it's a different sort of regulation. There's also idea of standardization that goes on there, but I don't know how to look at state per se in contemporary times when it comes to studying food and also studying agriculture, which is what I do. The second thing I would like to ask you is that you talk about the synesthetic reasoning, right? I found it really fascinating, and it's not just about valuing food, but also you are using it to value labor. I would like to understand what exactly you mean by synesthetic reasoning. I understand that, but it's also considered. It's also not so popular concept, and you borrow it from Heath Paxton, if I'm not wrong. So, I wonder if you could unpack the concept of it, because I think it's a very no. Is it just like a skill that can't be explained, or it's inexplicable? A notion of skill, how Shaila Sesha Galvin talks about trust in her book. It is something like trust is it's a very the concept itself is sort of non-definable. It's like some intuitionary thing that people talk about, which they themselves don't understand. So is it something like that, or so could you unpack a bit further for the audience? I think you can do that in the question and answer section. I'll move on to the other book, which is also a fascinating work on the idea of food. And then the first thing that comes to my mind when I was reading the book is the diversity of the topics that are covered. So I also had a deeper engagement with the book because I'm reading it. So uh, it was actually difficult for me to not get distracted. That was the main thing that I found it difficult, because there is so much information, and precisely because of the diversity that's there. Starting from kosher, and there is Uttarakhandi cuisine, and also there is this diaspora, Asian diaspora in Uganda. And so these are the things, it's very difficult for me not to Google it and then understand what these cuisine mean. The other thing, the first the section, what struck me in both the sections, the first section and the second section, is not just the idea of you talk, I think overall the sections talk about the non-linearity of tradition. And what struck me was it's not just about non-linearity of tradition, but it's also, as one of the authors themselves say, it's also about non-linearity of resistance and also non-linearity of appropriation. I think it's important for us to, as food studies scholars, to sort of compile all sorts of resistance, all modes of resistance that are going on in the field of food studies. And then in that way, I guess this book is a welcome first step on it. And in the sense, it sort of compiles all the things together. It also helps us like it's not just about how resistance are already being done. It's also about how to devise ways in which resistances can be built. For that, you need to have a comparative understanding of like how things are already being done. And also, it's not just about if it's confined to one particular region, people sort of uh, like uh, like lose track on how things are done. So it's better to like have a holistic idea of how. I mean, and this book is a, I mean, like welcome first step towards it. And second section, I mean, as you rightly mentioned, it's not the second section, I'm sorry, the third section, which is like a shortest section, which is like equally fascinating, even though it's very short. Like it talks about two things. It takes up two themes, and uh, but it talks about topics that haven't been touched so far. Like so, for example, the midday meal scheme. Whenever people talk about midday meal scheme, I mean, it's important, as the author rightly mentions. They talk about nutrition, and they also talk about like other, I mean, like social factors that go behind I mean, like midday meal scheme and the issues that the children face. But as they rightly point out, like. I mean, the taste. I mean, like as the topic of this discussion goes, like it's fascinating that the author has touched upon the idea of taste, and there are some practical difficulties that the children face in these schools. And secondly, the other idea of the other article which talks about high yielding varieties in the green revolution. So again, like whenever people talk about green revolution, it's also about it's always about like chemical fertilizers and the other political economy behind it. And the author rightly points out to the uh, land and ecology aspect of it. And finally, the topic on digitalization. It's equally fascinating. It's not just about like representations of food. It's also about like how food is produced. Like I know a lot of farmers, as the article by Sohini, like it's not just about like I mean, like consuming food, how the digital media mediates the consumption of food. But it's also about production of food. I mean, I know a farmer who is farming entirely based on the YouTube videos that he sees, that he watches. So it's fascinating how I mean, like yeah, the food gets circulated in the media, and I mean how it income, like traverses the production, consumption, and distribution realms. So thank you both the speakers for introducing the book. And then I mean, like I think the works are like quite relevant for contemporary times. And also, I think like as food scholars, like I think we also need to. I think whenever Dr. Patgiri devises the panels for the conferences, it's always a difficult task for. It must be a difficult task for her, because like it's always it's the topics are like too broad. It's not just that there's a diversity in cuisines, but also the themes that come under food studies are like quite diverse. And then it's always a difficult task to compile everything together. And then I think like both these works, uh, the I mean, the thing in which they stand apart is like they manage to do it very smoothly. The compilation of multiple themes under one heading, like they have done it like very smoothly. And then I think we also need to like devise more themes. That's what my I mean comment or suggestion would be to like devise like it's not they man I mean, like it's not just it's not enough to like I mean, I think there needs to be a sharpening of themes, like to devise and sharpening of themes. And then so that like there'll be more sustained engagement with the teams. I mean, like I think like the food studies, we can also like divide ourselves into. It's not just like to divide ourselves, but like I think if you manage to like make the themes more stark, I think, and then work on it, it'll be helpful for us to like have a more engaging or a more sustained discussion on the themes. I think I'll open up for the discussion. I think people can raise their hands. They can also write their comments in the chat box. I can ask them one by one. Yeah. And is it fine that we take like 2-3 questions together and then like the speakers can respond to that?
Should I
Yeah.
respond to that? This
Yeah.
thing, see, I think you rightfully kind of say that, I think uh, I did want to bring in, let me just tell two things. One is that it's not that, it's not that studies on food was absent in sociology and social anthropology. It's very important to understand that. All classic monograph on village and caste particularly have looked at in detail the rules of commensality, etc. But I think where I wanted to contribute after Manpreet's work, I mean, prior to me, there's also Manpreet Janeja's work, which looked at food from the actor network theory of studying everyday lives of Bengali food from the perspective of Dhaka and Kolkata. I really wanted to move away from these urban areas to really understand what was happening in the districts of West Bengal and Bangladesh. For me, multi-sited ethnography doesn't mean only looking at urban areas, and I think it's very important to kind of look at the cusp of the geographies, right? So methodologically, where should I go around looking for sweetness, particularly when sweets is an expensive commodity, right? Sweets is not like sort of a item with a nutritional value which is consumed every day or which should be consumed on every day. So what are the measurements? Like, how do I therefore look at this? And my interest actually came from the fact that when you ask this question, I really like the question about the state, because if we really look at the way in which the state kind of defines food, it is clearly in terms of the calorie intake and the nutritional requirement, right? That's one way. The second, I think it's very important, is that the state, like if we really look at because in the course that I teach on food, I always begin with a discussion on famine. Because if we remember that this thematic of unity in diversity actually comes about from the famine movement, and from the movement to critique the way in which British handled the famine. All the political parties came together, leaving their political thing behind on the issue of food, right? Now, when it comes to particular case like sweets, what actually, when I was writing up the book, I really thought that, whether it would be important to talk about 60s milk control order, and it was very relevant because there was a lot of criticism actually when the sweet shops had to remain open during the lockdown. And that point in time, I was writing the manuscript. And then I thought that, how do you really understand that, why did the sweet shops needed to remain open in Bengal? It was also because a lot of, one of the main consumers of this milk industry is the sweet shops. And it's not only the milk industry, but also the milk byproduct industry, the chana industry. There's this supply chain and this tells about a story of a particular caste group who actually kind of only makes their living out of particular milk byproducts. So I really thought that the question of state is very important when it comes to understanding biographies of food. So my project was mostly to do a biography of a food item, which was not done before. So I think methodologically it was challenging. The second, I think when you talk about that synesthesia, for me, it was primarily looking at the labor. This is what I forgot to touch upon as I spoke, that, you don't taste the product the way along, right? This is one sort of a produce where you don't taste it, you rely on your sense of touch and your sense of smell. So when it comes to synesthesia, yes, I'm drawing upon from Heather Paxson, but what Heather Paxson doesn't have to deal with is the sense of approximation. Because in the cheese industry, even if it is a post-Pasteurian, post-pastoral cheese industry, everything is measured. Here it's based on a sense of approximation, but the sense of approximation also has a certain skill to it, right? It takes years to come to that sense of approximation, which I call in the book andaz. For me, synesthetic reason is about developing an andaj, developing a sense of approximation, developing a sense of sensibility around how much of milk I work with. So early in the morning, the conversations that happen between a sweet shop owner and the head karygar of a sweet shop, today how much milk do you want to will we work with? It could be 50 liters, it could be 120 liters, it could be 250 liters, right? It was on the base, on the quantum of the milk, because it's not on the quantum of how many kgs of sweets you are going to produce. Do you get the point? So that reversal really allowed me that this is where the story of the state and the milk has to come in. I'll stop here.
Thank you, ma'am. I think Dr. Patgiri wants to share a couple of lines.
I just wanted to sort of build on what Ishita has said in terms of previous works, doing a lot of work in terms of commensality rules, food, etc. That's a very important point because a lot of students come to me and say, I want to do this, but there hasn't been much literature on it. So the literature is never going to be directly given to you on a platter. And the purpose of research is that you hunt for it. So this literature is found in these forms. So these works on village or caste may not be called food in their titles, but they will have important information in terms of how to build one's work. So a good part of research is also not about completely dismissing what has been done earlier, but recognizing and building on it. So there have been several works on food in the past as well. And the purpose is to build on them in that sense. A little bit about the methodological bit that I wanted to share is food is also perhaps one of the things that one has to think a lot in terms of methodology, positionality, reflexivity, and ethics. It's something which challenges you to break your work in and around food and in regions where there may be very different food habits and they ask you to eat with them. What do you do and what you don't do is a big part of your rapport building and how then the research processes. So in that sense, a lot of new kinds of thinking can be done around how food could be used as this methodological tool as well. So I think Ishita has been a senior for me, and I've seen her work on food. And what I've taken from that is how we need to also have these collective spaces where we have discussions and we build on these works and themes primarily from all kinds of viewpoints. And that is also the goal of this ad hoc group, which we are hoping will become a full-fledged research committee in July of the coming year. Let's hope for it. But it's also a part of how these discussions could be curated in that way and bringing together, the diverse voices which you mentioned, Sabari. That was the aim, that we should think about food in diverse ways and not just about, the way that we know it, right?
Thank you, Dr. Patgiri, for sharing your thoughts. I think I think I have a lot of thoughts on your book, but the thing is it's too, it's diverse and it's also but there are so much thing to talk about. It's very difficult to wrap it up in 5-10 minutes.
Don't
So,
worry about it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'm more fascinated about the way in which you have compiled everything together. That's a formidable, really, really formidable task in itself. And yeah, and yeah, and as I said, the amount of information it has is unimaginable actually. So are there any questions from the audience? Does anyone wants to share their thoughts or comments? If not, I think we can wrap it up. And I thank both the speakers for introducing their books and the discussions that followed. And also thank you, Dr. Patgiri, for organizing this event, and Dr. Ishita Dey for coming and sharing her thoughts. And hope to meet all of you in the next ad hoc group 3 event.
Yes, that is important. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Sabari.
Thank you. And thanks for giving me the opportunity. Thank you to read both the works. Yeah.